Hey guys, Freddie Wills here, back for another podcast, recapping last week's games as well as looking forward to this week's leans. 7-4 on my leans last week's podcast. We went 7-5 on the week for a small loss in profit. Unfortunately, our two biggest plays on Saturday, Stanford and Arizona, were losers. I'm sure we'll touch on at least one of those during this podcast. But 7-3 overall on Saturday. And another unfortunate is that my premium pick newsletter play on North Carolina, another loser. It's been a rough season so far for the newsletter, but if you haven't subscribed, now might be a good time because we are definitely due to bounce back after two straight losers. So make sure you subscribe by heading on over to freddiewills.com to get that one premium pick that clients pay for every week. So, recapping last week, let's go into this. App State got crushed on the road against Louisiana Lafayette. You know, another good Sun Belt team. App State had 4 turnovers in the game, but more importantly, they only had 211 yards. And the 41-13 final, in my opinion, was every bit as bad as it looked. This was with App State going 3 for 3 on fourth down. The biggest difference is they were 0 for 11 on third down. I mean, I really, at this point, don't trust their quarterback like I do in previous years. Chase Bryce, he has not been good. He's been turnover prone. And obviously, they got a big game here tonight, recording this on Wednesday, against hosting Coastal Carolina. I do think that spread is inflated. It opened at 3.5 and now is out to 5.5. I don't know what route I'm taking. I know Coastal Carolina has played literally nobody this year. So you're definitely getting line value with App State off a loss last week. But I don't know if you can trust Chase Bryce at this point, so I might not play that at all. I might give it out. I really got to dig deeper, but that's my feeling on that game here tonight, with App State getting an extra day to prepare, having played last Tuesday actually. So last Tuesday they're playing on Wednesday, and Coastal Carolina, of course, they played 13 days ago, so they have even more rest than App State here. So I'm not sure what route I'm taking, but I can tell you that all the money and tickets are on Coastal Carolina right now, which is why that spread has moved from 3.5 to 5.5. Moving on, San Jose State outgained San Diego State 345 to 240, but they lost the game by 6 in overtime. There was actually no touchdowns in regulation. This may offer value on overs in the future. San Jose State killed themselves with 12 penalties in this game for 101 yards. They'll be a 5-point favorite on the road this week, while San Diego State will be a 4-point dog on the road at Air Force, who just took down Boise State. No real leans in those matchups for me. Clemson held on to defeat Syracuse, but they sure did not cover the spread. You know, I didn't take my own advice on the podcast last week. I said that the under in this game would be a really good way to look. Instead, I took Clemson minus 13.5. I really thought their defense was going to shut out Syracuse. That was the main reason why I went with it. And I figured they could at least muster 20 to 21 points, but they hold off and win 17-14. They did have the ball late in the fourth, up 17-7 with a chance to cover. But honestly, even the points that Clemson scored, it was just a struggle. They had to have some lucky plays or some great offensive plays to even get those 2 touchdowns that they got. So I'm a little questionable on Clemson moving forward. Their defense also late in this game gave up a 62-yard pass, a 54-yard run, and nearly lost the game. And that was against a bad Syracuse offense that's at least one-dimensional. They can only really run the ball. They're not a good passing team, as we saw. They're away dogs this week against Pitt, another ACC team that upset them in the past. Clemson now 0-7 against the spread. I lean Clemson here against Pitt. Slight lean. But I definitely need to check some injuries. Early action was taking Pitt -3 to -3.5, but that immediately dropped back down to 3. So it seems to me that some sharp action on Clemson at +3.5 whenever it hits there. Marshall crushed North Texas 49-21, but they only outgained them by 66 yards. But this was, in my opinion, every bit of a blowout. Marshall got off to a 42-7 first half lead. There was plenty of garbage yards for North Texas in the second half. We know Marshall has been on the misleading final report over and over again, so they're not really a team that, in my opinion, you want to back as a favorite or that's going to be able to close a game out. North Texas had 2 big play touchdowns by DeAndre Torrey, a 75-yard run, a 51-yard run, which is worth noting. North Texas, a 21.5-point dog against Liberty this week. But it's worth noting that North Texas is happy to get down early and fight back late, and their offense has been pretty explosive over the past 2 weeks. We saw it against Missouri the week before, and we just saw it again this week. And obviously, Liberty, who they face this week, is off a big-time loss as a huge favorite. The biggest underdog loss, outright win in the group of 5 in quite some time here, as Louisiana Monroe upset them as a 31.5-point dog. It must have been one hell of a halftime speech, because Liberty was up 14-0 at the half, and then they got outscored 28-0 in the third quarter. Liberty had 3 turnovers in the game to Monroe's 1. But other than that, coming out of the locker room flat. I'm not sure what happened to Liberty. Liberty continues to get respect. They're a 22-point road favorite against North Texas, like I just mentioned. And Monroe, obviously off a huge upset, is a 13-point home dog to South Alabama. Monroe in their losses this year, they lost to some pretty good teams by double digits. I don't know if South Alabama is considered a team that can blow out a team, to be honest. Monroe lost to Kentucky, Coastal Carolina, and Georgia State by 35, 53, and 34 points. South Alabama has a little extra time to prepare, but haven't really been exactly blowing teams out in the past. So that spread is curious to me, but given the situation where Monroe just came off a monster underdog outright upset, I just can't. I wouldn't be able to back them this week, even though I think that spread's a little too high. So no official lean in that game. Purdue beat number 2 Iowa on the road 24-7, which was probably my best prediction of the day. It was a 3% winner. Jeff Brom's Boilermakers are now 4-1 versus Iowa. Purdue put up 464 yards of offense to Iowa's 271. They were +3 turnover margin, which was something Iowa, was dominating coming into the game. Iowa gets a much needed bye here, and I think they still have everything in front of them to play for. They can win out. Do I think that's going to happen? No, but I don't think that we're going to see any kind of hangover, especially after a bye. So definitely going to be looking at them in the future, because I still do like Iowa. I just did not like them against Purdue. Purdue goes back home, and now they'll have everyone telling them how great they are, and they're a 3-point home dog to Wisconsin. I want to back Wisconsin here, but I just don't think I can. Graham Mertz, terrible again last week against Army. So it's hard to get behind that. Purdue, I want to go back to see, I think it was 2018 where they had that major upset over Ohio State. They came back the next week at Michigan State and lost 13-23. So if you want to look at that as something to handicap, you can. And I believe they were probably an underdog in that game at Michigan State. Not sure, but they're an underdog here, but the difference here being they won on the road and now they're at home. Oklahoma dominated TCU, but they were actually outgained in this game by 4 yards. TCU was well in control of this. Oklahoma was well in control of this game, up double digits for the most of it. But it's really amazing that defense was supposed to be improved, yet they can't play a complete game. So I'm really not going to be the type to be buying on Oklahoma as a national title threat. With true freshman quarterback Caleb Williams, who was, he was great in this game, but he's faced 2 shit defenses thus far, and the hype train is only going to get larger. Oklahoma playing Kansas this week. I'll be interested in fading Oklahoma when they play some decent defenses down the stretch. They're going to wrap up the season at Baylor, home against Iowa State, and then at Oklahoma State. 3 solid defenses, and I'm going to be looking to probably fade Oklahoma in all 3 of those games, because their defense, which was supposed to be really good, hasn't shown me much lately, giving up all those points to Texas, and then 31 points to TCU, getting outgained by TCU. TCU is not 100% healthy. They were banged up in that game, so definitely going to be looking to fade Oklahoma down the stretch here. TCU will host West Virginia this week, who is off a bye and really off a really bad game. West Virginia, I think everybody was taking them at Baylor the week before. Now, obviously, Baylor looks a hell of a lot better. They just beat BYU now. And TCU, a 4.5-point favorite. I lean towards West Virginia. Moving on here, Indiana, they could not score touchdowns in this game against Michigan State. We took the under in the first half, which cashed for clients. However, we did not have anything on the full game on the spread side or anything like that. Michigan State was outgained in this game, 322 to 241. The biggest issue, obviously, Indiana coming off their bye had time to prepare, and they have a very respected head coach in Tom Allen who can coach up the defense. They've always been very solid on the defensive side of the ball. They held Kenneth Walker to 3.7 yards per carry. And actually, 7 of Michigan State's points were on a pick six early in that game. So the 20-15 final, really not indicative of how that game went. I think Michigan State now on a bye, and they'll be hosting Michigan next week. Both those teams should be undefeated in that game, so it's definitely going to be one of those games that are very exciting with that rivalry. But it looks like Indiana might have laid out the blueprint to stop Michigan State, stop Kenneth Walker. Don't allow the explosive plays over the top. We'll see if Michigan can, and we'll see what that spread is next week. On the other hand, Indiana hosts Ohio State this week as a 19.5 point favorite. I lean Ohio State there. I think we're getting a couple of points of value just based on how Indiana looked against the ranked Michigan State team that I thought has been playing a little bit over their head all season. Texas controlled this game against Oklahoma State. They held leads of 17-3, 24-13 before they basically got shut down in the fourth quarter, losing by giving up 17 fourth quarter points. Texas to me just seemed to be they seem to get worn down in this game, and that's definitely possible after the Oklahoma game. The play calling late was weird. It was like Bijan Robinson just disappeared from the game script. Texas obviously still very talented. I'll likely be looking to back them next week after their much-needed bye, as they'll head to Baylor for a relatively big game, a bigger game for Baylor. And then Oklahoma State, on the other hand, has challenging road game at Iowa State this week. There'll be a 7-point road dog. I don't know that I can recall ever seeing this before, unless it's a group of 5 versus a power 5 opponent where you have a top 10 team in Oklahoma State ranked number 9 in the AP poll, and they're going on the road to face an unranked team, and they're a 7-point dog. Iowa State very easily could be undefeated as well, though. I actually lean Iowa State -6.5, -7. Baylor, we mentioned them previously. Impressive in their win against BYU, 38-24. They outgained BYU by 125 yards in the game, and Jerry Bohannon has been great this season. Really, I don't know if it was on my podcast or in one of my premium pick analysis that I doubted him. He's been great, and I'm definitely gonna have to make some adjustments on Baylor for sure moving forward. Still not gonna overreact here though too much, especially on BYU. BYU still a good team. Baylor had several coaches from BYU staff last year on their staff this year, so BYU had to make some pretty significant changes in a short period of time before that game, and it definitely seemed to impact them at least early. BYU, 4.5 point favorite at Washington State this week, but I think that line is a bit inflated for me to back BYU, so I don't really lean any way, because obviously Washington State coaching staff just lost their head coaches in Rolovich, who got fired due to not taking the vaccine because it's state of Washington law now as of October 18th. Hard to know where the players are going to be with that. I'm not even going to speculate or guess, so I'm probably just going to pass that game. I have no clue, and I think the spread is inflated. So I would have liked BYU at pick, but definitely not going to be looking at them in this game. Speaking of Washington State, we thought it might be a distraction this past week because everybody pretty much knew that Rolovich was going to be gone this week. But I guess it makes sense that the players really stepped up knowing their head coach was going to be let go. We obviously gave out Stanford -1 as our play of the day, and it turned out to be a loser, tough one to swallow, as Stanford got out to a 13-0 lead, and I thought we were going to be great in this game, but Washington State battled back in the second quarter, and then Stanford had a 31-27 lead with 7 minutes left to play late in the fourth quarter. But in my opinion, it was a lucky it was an unlucky loss due to two fumbles by Stanford and their inability to score touchdowns instead of just field goals. Washington State scored 3 unanswered touchdowns in the second quarter. That alone flipped this game and put Stanford's whole game flow out of whack, especially in the third quarter. Part of my handicap was I thought that they were going to be able to pass the ball. They definitely did a great job passing, and Stanford goes into a much needed bye at a very disappointing 3-4, and we'll see what we're going to do with them out on the other side of that bye. Florida got upset as an 11-point road favorite at LSU. Really not shocked here. It's a tough place to play. Florida -4 in turnover margin. Really the reason why. LSU's defense is complete trash at this point. I really don't know that I could back LSU, even though all their spreads are going to be inflated. Florida, in my opinion, has some serious holes, especially on defense, which we knew. But I still wouldn't be shocked if Florida they were right in that game against Alabama. I think Anthony Richardson needs to start at quarterback, in my opinion. He's far more dynamic, better passer than Emory Jones. So, if Dan Mullen makes that switch before the Georgia game, it could be very interesting. I'm not going to say I'm not going to back Florida the rest of the year. I'm not saying I'm not going to fade them the rest of the year. Obviously Florida's getting the bye here before the Georgia game, so it's going to be definitely interesting. And then LSU this week takes on Ole Miss as a double-digit dog. They, of course, announced that Ed Orgeron's not going to be coming back next year, but he's going to finish up the season. So that's another interesting dynamic because Ed's effort level, I don't think he really helps LSU on game day. I think he relies on his coordinators. But during the week and before the game, getting his players motivated, I think that's where his strengths are. So is he going to be... I don't know where he stands and how he's going to be. Is he pissed about being let go? Because it sounded like it was mutual. I don't know where his mind is, and I'm not going to guess. So there's no way I could play this LSU Ole Miss thing. Lane Kiffin's also being thrown out there for a lot of other coaching jobs as well. But Ole Miss obviously still a lot to play for this season. Their only loss is to Alabama, and something freaky could happen, and Ole Miss could still get into the SEC championship game. So Ole Miss a lot of to play for here, and LSU's defense has been complete crap. So I'm not sure where I would go in that game. BC, Boston College, +3 at home at night for the first time since 2018 was a spot, I almost took them. At the last minute not the last minute, but Friday I decided to pass. Something just didn't feel right about that game. And I'm glad I did, as NC State won 33-7. A bit closer look in that final score. Boston College had 2 turnovers, a fumble, and an interception, and they were just 1 for 4 on fourth down, ultimately proving to be the difference in this game. I'm not ready to throw Boston College in the trash for that performance, and I'm not ready to crown NC State as one of the favorites in the ACC. But moving forward here, we do get Boston College going on the road to face Louisville team that's off a bye, so probably passing there. Otherwise, I would look maybe for Boston College to rebound. I think that spread's a little high still, so I definitely lean Boston College. I think Boston College can get the running game going again against Louisville. And their defense did not play poorly against NC State. Like I said, it was the turnovers and the crappy field position that their offense put their defense in that game. NC State, on the other hand, will go on the road to face Miami as a -3 point favorite, and I definitely lean NC State. I think it's a huge coaching mismatch. If you've listened to my podcast, you guys knows that I'm not a big fan of Manny Diaz, and obviously that was our premium play in our newsletter last week was North Carolina -7.5, which lost again against Miami. North Carolina, despite an early pick 6 given up by Sam Howell, covered the spread for the majority of the game. Honestly, it looked good where they were up double digits for the majority of this game, but they give up the backdoor touchdown with 3 minutes to play. To be honest though, let's be transparent. Miami did outgain North Carolina in the game, and they lost by 3 despite having 3 turnovers. So on the surface, it looks like Miami outplayed North Carolina, but like I said, North Carolina was up by double digits in this game, and there was obviously some garbage yards where North Carolina was not playing really aggressive defense. So I'm still not high on Miami, and North Carolina has a bye this week. I will look to back North Carolina again against some poor offenses because I think that they can put up points on pretty much everybody. But can the opponent offense keep track with them? And so I'm definitely still going to be looking at North Carolina moving forward. Nevada plus 5 turnover margin in their win 34-17 over Hawaii. Hawaii was also 0 for 2 on fourth down. So that's really like turning the ball over 7 times. Hawaii beat Fresno the week before, and now Nevada and Fresno will face off this week at Fresno. Slight lean towards Nevada plus 4, but definitely an interesting game to look at here because you would think that Nevada would have beaten Hawaii by more given the stats that I just threw out there. Here's another interesting, and I'm going to have another lean here for sure. Colorado State dominates on defense, allowing only 76 yards and win 36-7. This made their offense and defense really look better than it was. Not a huge fan of Steve Adazio, but he's doing good things up there at Colorado State this year. I think it's a bit misleading personally, but New Mexico, who only 76 yards, I think they were down to their third or fourth string quarterback. That offense is definitely not the same without Terry Wilson. Colorado State goes on the road to face Utah State this week. Utah State's been in the misleading final report a few times against some of the big boys, BYU and Boise. So Utah State plus 3.5. I think they're going to be a live dog on Friday night at home. Colorado State has benefited greatly from weak schedules of offenses faced, and Utah State has played their toughest games at home. But when you look at their schedule, they've actually come up with some really impressive wins. So it's not, crazy to think they won't come up with a win at home. They beat Washington State on the road, and they beat Air Force on the road. So Utah State should not be an underdog, in my opinion, in this game, and I'm definitely going to be looking to take them on Friday night. Strongly. Probably my strongest lean of this podcast. So that pretty much wraps up today's podcast. I do want to touch on some major look-ahead spots for next week. Ohio State has Penn State next week, so that's one major look-ahead. Michigan State has Michigan next week, and Florida State, who's a 35-point favorite this week against UMass, they've got to be licking their chops to face a beatable Clemson team. Does Florida State, they came up with a big win against North Carolina last week. Do they look past UMass, probably the worst college football team in the nation, towards facing a Clemson team they can beat? They already got upset by a big-time underdog this season, so I don't know that they will look past it. But those are my 3 takeaways for next week. Definitely looking forward to this week's college football. So again, appreciate you guys listening. If you like what you heard, please like, subscribe, and if you do, write a review on my podcast for Apple Podcasts. Screenshot it, email it to me. I'm happy to give you a week of premium picks for free. Thanks, and good luck this week.